It's hard to believe it's been almost 4 years now since I first moved some beans around on a sheet of paper, picked up my pencil, and started drawing a fantasy map. What started as a hobby for me pretty quickly turned into a form of minor income. Now, these past few years that I've been doing fantasy map commissions, I have learned that there is a lot of demand out there for custom fantasy maps and other forms of art in tabletop RPGs. Whether that be character portraits, painted miniatures, or 3D crafted terrain, there is a lot of demand out there. And to be honest, a lot of you probably have the skill. But how does one, practically speaking, start turning this art into income? Let's talk. Who is this WASD20 talking about how to make money in this once pure hobby? Filthy capitalist! I remember when people were in this hobby for the love of the game, creating for the sake of art. Well, there's something kind of noble about drawing a map for a fellow dungeon master and creating for the sake of art, helping out a brother or sister in arms. Personally, I pretty quickly found out that drawing fantasy maps was taking a lot of time away from my family, and through a lot of encouragement from my wise friends over at Absolute Tabletop, I started creating maps for money. Sitting alone at my computer or in front of a pad of paper for hours on end was actually taking a lot of time away from my wife and kids, and I enjoyed the fact that I could actually have something to show for that. I could take my family out for a nice dinner on Friday with some of the money I got paid for a map. Maybe even save up for a vacation that's a little bit nicer than just camping. Nothing wrong with camping, I love it and all, but sometimes it's nice to do some other things. Moreover, tabletop role-playing games are seeing a major renaissance. It is a golden age, in my opinion, for some of the bigger published RPGs, but also because the indie space is just absolutely booming. The little guys are creating amazing things, and a lot of them are doing it because there's the prospect of actually making a living doing it. So this video is kind of an invitation into that creative space. You don't have to sit on the sidelines for this renaissance, this revival. You can participate. You can be someone that dungeon masters or even RPG publishers go to for a piece of art. Create, improve yourself, and chase your dreams. Capitalist filth. So with that out of the way, let me introduce myself a little bit so you know who you're dealing with. My name is Nate, I run this channel, WASD20, and I also run a bit of a side mapping business called Sellsword Maps. I'll put a link to my website down in the video description and you can check that out. But you'll notice that the website isn't really anything fancy, and the reality is I don't need it to be because I get a lot of demand for my services, mainly because I'm here on YouTube and it's such a great way to get the word out. So I want to just note that I'm a bit of an exception to some of the rules here in that I have a large YouTube following and I don't need to promote as hard. That said, a lot of people are very successful and don't have a fancy website. So anyway, we'll get to some of that. I should also note that I do not draw maps full time. This is very much a side gig for me. I draw anywhere from probably 5 to 10 maps per year. I just squeeze it in where I can. I am a father of 3, I'm a husband, I am a high school teacher, I run this YouTube channel and put a lot of time and energy into it, and I squeeze the mapping in on the side of those things. So really, I only spend a couple hours a week working on maps. There are a lot more talented people out there, and there are a lot of people making a full-time living drawing maps, but I am not one of those people. So just want you to know who you're dealing with. I still think I have some wisdom to offer here, and I wish I would have known some of these things 3.5 years ago when I was starting to do fantasy map commissions. So in this video, we're going to be talking about how you should already be creating maps if you hope to get map commissions, how you can promote yourself, and we'll get into a lot of the logistics of staying organized, how to communicate, how to charge, how much to charge. And I'll be talking about some of the pitfalls, some of the places where I think people stumble when they're getting into commissioned kind of freelance work. So I'll definitely be talking about fantasy maps, but much of what I say will be applicable to the character portraits, the painting of miniatures, crafting 3D terrain, and other kind of freelance artwork in this tabletop RPG creative space. At the end, I'll talk a little bit more specifically about painting miniatures for money, because I do know some people who do that, and I've definitely thought about it myself and done a lot of research. Now, maybe you're not actually here because you want to get into commission work of any kind. Maybe you're just here out of curiosity. Maybe you're here because you are thinking about hiring someone to draw a map for you. And if so, I think that some of these tips I give will help you understand and work with a cartographer a little bit better, or any sort of other artist who you're hoping to hire.
Or maybe you're here because you just like my videos and you like to hear me talk, or you like the shape of my head.
Look at the size of it!
So let's begin step by step. First step, create. If you aim to be someone who does something creative for money, you should already be doing that creative thing. This is probably more true in some other areas. For example, writing. If you want to be someone who writes novels, you better start writing a novel. If you want to be someone who creates video games, you have no excuse these days. With modern technology, you can create games now. The barrier for entry on all sorts of things is so low. There are all kinds of tutorials on YouTube and other places. There is no excuse to not start doing the thing you hope to do. This is especially true in the creative space. If you want to get paid to draw fantasy maps, start drawing fantasy maps. Develop your skill and get the word out. Now, I do think it doesn't take much with fantasy maps. I have seen people draw a single fantasy map and just knock it out of the park and get people asking them, can you do one for me? And it can be that simple. But I do recommend creating as much as possible and starting to develop your skills. Step 2 is promote. Get the word out. Advertise. There are so many ways you can do this, and really I think it's a matter of picking and choosing, because if you try to do it all, you're probably going to drive yourself a little bit crazy. Certainly social media is one great way. I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I often post channel-related stuff or maps there and try to get the word out that way. Try to show people what I'm doing. It doesn't have to be nice, finished, polished maps. It can be concepts you're messing with, works in progress, but using social media for that sort of stuff is really great. You can also try posting stuff on Imgur? I just realized I have no idea how to say that. Or DeviantArt or ArtStation. These are places where a lot of artists post their work and get noticed. Now, specifically for maps, I definitely recommend posting to our mapmaking. The mapmaking subreddit is a great community. I've posted a lot of stuff there. I go there pretty often just to look at the amazing work people are doing. It's a good place to get honest feedback and to get noticed. Another place I definitely recommend for fantasy maps is the Cartographers Guild. Now, honestly, I have not posted here that much. As I mentioned, I get a lot of requests and publicity just because of my YouTube channel, and I don't really have to work as hard at getting the word out. But the Cartographers Guild is a place where a lot of amazing cartographers hang out, like some of the best, and they have a really active community in their forums. So start building your portfolio there and just interacting with people in the forums and getting feedback on your work. It is actually a place where people will go to look for a cartographer that they want to hire. And I have often sent people there myself. I have got a really long waiting list at this time, and generally I'm telling people, yeah, I'm not taking commissions much anymore. It might be a year or more. Reach out in 9 months or something like that. And I'm trying to turn a lot of people away and direct people to places like the Cartographers Guild. So it's definitely a place I would recommend posting your work if you are looking to drum up some business. Lastly, a couple things you might want to consider is getting your own website and maybe a business card. Now, your own website can be very simple. Just a blog is good enough. You don't have to have a paid website like I do, sellswordmaps.com. You can just get a Wix site, a free WordPress site, and go nuts and start posting your maps and blogging about your works in progress. Third, stay organized. I recommend having one contact address. You're gonna have all this social media stuff, but definitely when people start reaching out and saying, hey, I'd like to hire you to do a map, I recommend having an email address. You can create a new free Gmail address and just start putting all these communications in one place so that you're not going crazy checking for messages here, there, and everywhere. Someone reaches out on Twitter or Instagram and says, hey, I love your work. I'd love to hire you. Give them your email address and direct them all toward that one place. Another thing that I do to help me stay organized is I have a spreadsheet. I just have a Google sheet, and on this sheet, once I have agreed to do a map for somebody and they've agreed to my price, I put their name, I put the estimated start date, I put the price agreed upon, I put the balance that they have remaining, and I put any notes. And sometimes I'll have more notes in a separate document, and usually that's a good idea. Once I start getting a lot of commissions, it's hard to keep track of who wanted what. So having a document in my Google Drive where I can take detailed notes on what they want is really key for me. I can even paste some screenshots and other images in there if they provide those. But once you start getting a fair number of people wanting maps, it's really important that you stay organized. Next, let's talk about communication. I definitely recommend having either on your website some very basic information like I have that tells people, if you want to hire me, here are some basic steps. Email me here. Here's the things you might want to include in your email. And personally, I also have a PDF that I send people. It's just a 1.5 page PDF that has some basic information on sellsword maps commissions. That way I can ask people, just read this, and that will lay a lot of the groundwork, and then we can start talking and nail down specifics. But that just saves a lot of work for me. One thing you also might want to consider in terms of communication is a contract. I have only done this a couple times, and it's always been at the initiative of one of my clients. Maybe it's a publisher or someone who's going to be a little more dotting the I's and crossing the T's. In that case, a contract will definitely come in handy. I don't have any that I can show you at the moment. I couldn't actually find any, and I rarely operate with them. This is one of those things that it's probably a good idea, but I don't do it. Still, having that email chain as a record of what we've talked about and agreed upon is really valuable, and I have had to use that before, saying, actually, if you remember, we never said that this was going to be color or something like that. Next, let's talk about the money, charging. First off, how much do you charge? Well, I definitely recommend thinking hourly and trying to get a feeling for how long did this map take me. Maybe when you're early on drawing maps for your own enjoyment or just trying to build up your portfolio, keep a log of how many hours you're putting into those maps. That's something that I have done, and it's really valuable because sometimes your perceptions can actually be pretty far off the reality. So how much do you charge hourly? Well, I generally try to think about $30 an hour. Now, some of you are probably thinking, what? That's a lot of money. Well, that was a recommendation I got from a friend a while back, a few years ago really, who told me that that's generally what a lot of freelance artists are making, about $30 an hour. It might be a lot more than that. For a lot, I know it is less, but that's the way I try to think about it. So for me, an average map is going to take me anywhere from 10 to 20 hours, I'd say, and I have spent probably up to 25, 28 hours on some maps. So we're talking about probably a minimum for me of about $300. I very rarely will do a map for less than $300. Now you might kind of balk at that and wonder, how could anyone afford such a thing? You have to remember that a lot of people who are willing to pay for a map have probably been building this world over the period of years, playing in this world at their game table. And now they've finally saved up enough money, or they've finally kind of solidified things in their world to the point where they want to hire someone to make it pretty. And that's you. So this is one of the reasons that I think people are willing to pay a lot of money for a custom fantasy map that you are creating of their world. Now, I'm not saying to take advantage of that, I don't think so, but I think that you can charge a fair price, a good hourly wage, and expect that people will pay for it. You might want to start quite a bit lower than that. You might already have a job that pays $10 an hour and you figure, you know what, if I can make fantasy maps instead at $10 an hour, I would much rather do that. And that's very true. So feel free to start there, but I think you'll pretty soon find that you can charge more and you deserve more. Some of my earliest maps were somewhere around $75, $100, and I very quickly learned that, okay, I'm spending a lot more time than I thought on these, and I should be charging a lot more. In terms of how to charge, I would recommend probably something like PayPal, but there are other methods as well. I'm not sure if Venmo would work. I've used that a lot with friends and I'm not sure how secure it is, but one thing with PayPal I learned very early on is that if someone sends you money as a friend, they can actually cancel that payment. I had someone do this to me and I don't know how they did it or if their account went negative and then it bounced or what, but I got half payment up front for a map, which is definitely something I recommend. Have someone paying you half of the money agreed upon up front before you even start the map. Sometimes I'll just say, you know, you have to pay me at least $100 up front before I start the map. But either way, you definitely don't want to start someone's map until you've been paid a little bit. So in this particular case, I think the person paid half up front and then they paid the second half and I delivered the final version of the map. And then something like a week later, that money disappeared out of my PayPal account. I have no idea how it happened, but they said that this payment has been canceled. I reached out, chased them down, never got my money. So that was a pretty good lesson early on that it's probably worthwhile to use the invoice option in PayPal where you're actually charging someone as a business. You don't have to have an official PayPal business account to do this. Just search around for the invoice option in there and create an invoice with a specific amount paid. You can allow them to pay in installments, and there's a lot of options, and it can almost act as a contract too, which is really nice. I have accepted personal checks before, but you always want to make sure that you deposit the check and that if there's a hold on the check, that expires and it's all good before you deliver the final product. Also, when I'm actually sharing maps with clients for feedback, if it's someone I don't know very well, I'm often sending pretty low resolution images. The point is, I don't want them to get a pretty close to finished map and decide, you know what, I think I'm good on that final payment. So that is a word on how I manage payment. Now the reality is I could probably charge a lot more than I do just because I'm well known, but personally I don't like to take advantage of that. I would rather just keep things at a fair price, a price I can feel okay about, taking time away from my family and taking time out of my busy schedule while still feeling like I'm giving this person a good value and providing a valuable service. Next, let's talk about some of the pitfalls to avoid. I think the first one for a new cartographer is don't overcommit. You might post one beautiful map that all of a sudden gets you all sorts of attention, people reaching out, wanting you to draw them a map. Don't overcommit. Plan very conservatively in terms of your timeline because you'll probably find that you're going to get burnt out if you overcommit. Personally, I definitely started by saying I will do one map a month, and I found that, even that was too much for me. So I have scaled things back quite a bit, and I try to, kind of tell people, hey, this is an estimate. I will probably be able to start this in about 4 months, but no guarantees. And it's also, I think, okay to at some point say, I'll put you on my waiting list, but I really am not sure when it could be. Right now I'm telling people it'll probably be over a year, and I'm just turning a lot of people away. So don't overcommit, plan conservatively, and take it slow as you're kind of learning how long things will actually take you and how much you can handle, because you're probably doing this in addition to a day job. Another pitfall to avoid is sacrificing for the sake of publicity. You might have people coming to you who say, I am going to use this for the fantasy novel I'm writing, and it will be really good exposure. Or I'm putting this in the RPG book I'm writing and it'll be really good exposure for you, so I can only pay you $20. Is that okay? It'll be really good exposure. My recommendation is do not fall for that stuff. If people want some of your art, you deserve to be paid for that. All right, so that is some of my advice for aspiring fantasy cartographers. Now let's spend a couple minutes talking about miniatures. First off, I want to give a big shout out to 2 people who helped me when I was kind of doing some research and answered a lot of my questions about painting miniatures. These are, first off, Midwest Miniature Guy, and secondly, Paint or Die Miniatures. I'll put links to their Facebook pages down below, and you can go check them out. They're both very skilled painters who have done a lot of commission work. So first off, in things of promoting and advertising your services, I think almost all the things I said in the mapping section applies here. I think there might be one additional place where you can get the word out, and that is in game shops. Yes, in physical game shops, they often have display cases of miniatures, and you can rent out that space sometimes, or you can enter miniature painting contests and possibly win and get yours on the display. And that's a really great way to get noticed locally, which is kind of cool because then you don't have to deal with shipping and all that stuff. Sometimes they'll let you put a little business card there by your miniatures so that people know who they can reach out to if they want to hire that person to paint some miniatures. Now, just as with maps, there's a wide variety of different levels that people are charging. But from what I can tell, often people are making a lot less painting miniatures because it's really hard to justify, paying $120 for one miniature. So if someone were to spend 4 hours on one miniature and expect $30 an hour, that would be a really steep price. But who spends 4 hours on one miniature? I mean, come on. Not me. So yeah, if you want to get into painting miniatures, I would say make sure you have a really quick but good looking process. You'll want to get it clean, you'll want to get some nice highlights and shading, but you don't want to go overboard with detail because you're not going to find very many people willing to pay big bucks for a miniature. You might spend 2 or 3 hours on a miniature here or there, but if you're doing monsters and stuff like that, I think batch painting is the way to go. Maybe you're painting 4 or 5 orcs and you can expect to spend about 4 or 5 hours on those orcs. And you might be able to make $30 an hour, but most of the folks I've talked to are making quite a bit less than that painting miniatures. So my impression based on my research is that miniature painters might make a little bit less than cartographers and other artists, but I could be way off on that. It might be very equal, and there probably are some that make a whole lot more than I ever make drawing maps. All right, I'd love to hear from you. If you have any comments to add, if you are an experienced cartographer or artist or freelancer, definitely leave me your comments down below. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you have any other questions about this, I'd also love to hear from you. I would like to thank my patrons so much for their support. In addition to drawing maps and making a little bit of money on YouTube, these Patreon supporters are a huge part of what I do here. So I want to thank them. And if you want to join with them in support of this channel, go to patreon.com/WASD20. There are some pretty cool rewards going on right now, including a quarterly encounter map and weekly live streams where I stream map work. Usually every Monday night I do that for my patrons, and you can get access to those live streams and all the past live streams if you join now. If you're not subscribed and you want more videos on tabletop RPGs and fantasy maps, I definitely recommend hitting that subscribe button down below. I would greatly appreciate it. I want to thank you all so much for joining me. Everybody take care. You'll see me again very soon.